Before dawn, the village rests in silence. No battles, no heroes, only breath, fading fire, and slow time. This is a quiet medieval life, meant to be heard, not rushed. If these calm history stories help you relax or sleep, please subscribe for more quiet nights like this.
When the bells were silent, a quiet medieval life. Part 1. Dusk over the village. The sun lowered itself slowly, as if it had learned long ago that there was no need to hurry. Its light softened as it touched the edge of the fields, turning the soil a deeper shade of brown, almost warm, almost gentle. The day had been long, but it ended the same way it always did, without ceremony, without sound. Across the open land, the last movements of work came to a close. A wooden rake was leaned against a fence. A basket was set down near a doorway. No one rushed to finish. The work simply stopped when bodies decided it was time. Muscles eased, backs straightened slowly, hands rested. A narrow path led from the fields toward the village. One by one, figures walked along it, their steps steady and quiet. Boots pressed into the dirt with familiar weight. No one spoke. Words were not needed now. The evening carried its own understanding. The houses stood close together, built from wood darkened by years of weather and smoke. Their roofs sloped low, protecting what was inside from wind and rain. As dusk deepened, thin trails of smoke rose slowly and palely into the cooling air. Fires were being fed, not for cooking anymore, but for warmth and comfort. Inside one home, a small flame caught and spread gently across a bundle of dry wood. The fire did not roar, it breathed. Orange light flickered across rough walls, revealing marks left by time and hands. Each mark had a reason for being there, though no one remembered it anymore. A woman moved quietly across the room, setting aside a simple wooden bowl. The evening meal had ended. It had been plain, as most meals were, but filling enough. She wiped her hands and paused, listening to the fire. Its soft crackle felt steady, reliable, like a promise that the night would be kind. Near the hearth, a child sat on the floor, knees drawn close. The warmth reached their face, and their eyes grew heavy. Their head dipped forward, lifted, then dipped again. Each blink lingered a moment longer than the last. The firelight danced faintly in those tired eyes, moving slowly, peacefully. Outside, the village grew quieter with every passing breath. Doors closed gently, wood touching wood with soft finality. Latches were set. Windows glowed briefly as candles were adjusted, then dimmed as wicks were lowered. Light was precious in the evening. It was used carefully. A man walked past the last house and stopped for a moment, looking back at the land beyond the village. The fields lay still now, empty and darkening. He felt no worry about them. Tomorrow would come, as it always did, and the land would wait. It always waited. The sky changed its color gradually, slipping from pale gold into muted blue. Clouds drifted overhead, untroubled, unobserved. The air cooled just enough to remind the village that night had arrived, but not enough to cause discomfort. Fires were ready. Cloaks were near at hand. A narrow lane curved between the houses. Straw lay scattered across it, pressed flat by many passing feet. A dog curled near a doorway, tail tucked close, ears relaxed but aware. Somewhere farther away, another answered with a low sound, not a warning, only recognition. Inside another home, an older man sat on a bench near the wall. His hands rested on his knees, fingers relaxed. He stared into the fire without thinking, letting the day release him slowly. His breathing was even, calm, steady. The fire asked nothing of him. It simply existed. The smell of smoke and wood hung gently in the air, familiar and comforting. It clung to clothing, to hair, to walls. It was the scent of evening, of rest, of survival carried quietly from one day to the next. No bell rang to announce the hour. No voice called out. The village did not need signals. Bodies understood the rhythm. Shoulders lowered, steps slowed, thoughts softened and drifted apart like clouds in a wide sky. Shoes were placed neatly near doors, tools were leaned carefully against walls, cloaks were folded and set aside. These small acts were done without thought, guided by habit formed over many evenings just like this one. Candles burned lower as shadows grew longer. The light no longer reached every corner, but that was acceptable. Darkness was not feared here. It was expected, welcomed, allowed to settle gently around everything. The village was not asleep yet. It hovered in the quiet space between movement and rest, between day and night. Fires glowed steadily, breath rose and fell. The world felt smaller, closer, contained within wooden walls and shared warmth. Nothing unusual happened, nothing needed to. The sun disappeared fully beyond the fields, and the last trace of its light faded from the sky. The night arrived, without sound, and the village accepted it, the way it always had, the way it always would.
As the night settled more deeply, the firelight became the center of every room. Shadows stretched along the walls, soft and slow, moving only when flames shifted or a body passed quietly through the space. The village no longer felt like a collection of houses, but like one shared shelter, breathing together in the dark. Inside a small home near the edge of the lane, a man added one last piece of wood to the hearth. He did it carefully, placing it just right so the fire would last through the night. Sparks lifted briefly, then disappeared. He watched for a moment, then stepped back, satisfied. There was comfort in knowing the fire would still be there when the hours grew cold and long. A woman sat on a low stool nearby, mending a worn sleeve by candlelight. Her hands moved slowly, guided more by memory than sight. The needle passed in and out of the fabric with steady patience. She did not rush. There was no reason to finish quickly. Time belonged to the night. The child who had sat near the hearth earlier was now wrapped in a blanket, resting against the wall. Their breathing had evened out, shallow and soft. Every so often they shifted slightly, then grew still again. Sleep had taken them without effort, as it often did after a full day. Outside, the narrow paths lay empty. Moonlight touched the edges of roofs and fences, outlining them gently against the dark. The sky was wide and quiet, holding the village in its calm. No stars were counted, no wishes were made. The night was simply there. A faint breeze moved through the bare branches beyond the houses, carrying the sound of leaves brushing together. It was a small sound, easily missed, but it reminded the village that the world beyond its walls was still awake in its own way. In one house, an older couple sat side by side on a bench. They did not speak. They did not need to. The silence between them was familiar, shaped by years of evenings spent like this one. Their shoulders touched lightly, a simple closeness that asked for nothing more. The fire popped softly, ash settled, candle flames leaned slightly, then straightened again. Light flickered across faces, across hands, across the worn grain of the wooden floor. Everything looked softer by firelight, less sharp, less demanding. A kettle rested near the hearth, its contents warming slowly.
It would not boil. It was not meant to. Warmth was enough. The faint sound of water shifting inside was barely audible, like a breath taken in sleep. Somewhere deeper in the village, a door creaked as someone stepped inside and closed it gently behind them. Footsteps faded. Quiet returned, thicker than before. The hours moved without anyone counting them. No one watched the sky for signs of time passing. Bodies guided themselves toward rest, following a rhythm learned over many seasons. A man lay back on a simple bed of straw and wool. He pulled the blanket up to his chest and let his arms rest at his sides. His muscles still held the memory of work, but the fire's warmth slowly eased it away. His eyes closed, not all at once, but gradually, blinking slower and slower until they no longer opened. Nearby, the woman set aside her sewing and blew out the candle. Darkness filled the room, but the fire remained, glowing softly, just enough to keep the night gentle. She settled beside him, adjusting the blanket with a quiet hand. In another home, someone stirred the fire one last time, then turned away. The room grew dimmer, shadows blending into one another. The world inside that space became smaller, contained within the warmth and the dark. Outside, the dog near the doorway lifted its head briefly, listening. Nothing disturbed the night. Satisfied, it rested again, breath slow, body relaxed. The village held still, not frozen, but calm, like a pond after the wind has passed, its surface smooth and quiet. Even the air seemed heavier now, pressing gently against walls and roofs. Sounds did not travel far. Each house existed in its own pocket of warmth and shadow, yet all were connected by the same night. No thoughts of tomorrow pressed in. Tomorrow would arrive whether invited or not. Tonight was enough. The fire in each home settled into a steady glow, no longer bright, but enduring. It was the kind of light that did not demand attention, only presence. Breathing slowed across the village. Chests rose and fell in quiet rhythm. Dreams began without announcement, carrying fragments of the day away. Outside, the moon climbed higher, casting pale light across the fields. The land lay untouched, resting as deeply as the people who lived upon it. The night stretched on, wide and patient. It asked for nothing, offered rest, and held the village within its darkness.
The night deepened until it felt complete, as though nothing more could be added to it. Darkness settled fully around the village, no longer shifting, no longer changing. It simply remained, calm and steady, like a long breath held without effort. Inside the houses, fires had burned down to embers. The bright flames of earlier hours were gone, replaced by a low, steady glow. Red and orange coals rested quietly, giving off just enough warmth to soften the cold. Shadows no longer moved along the walls. They stayed where they were, settled and still. Most of the village slept now, not all at once, but slowly, as sleep always came here. It arrived gently, touching one person, then another, until the quiet was complete. In one small room, a man shifted slightly in his sleep, then grew still again. His breathing was deep and even. The weight of the day no longer pressed against his body. Muscles loosened, thoughts faded, only rest remained. Beside him, another form lay wrapped in wool, face turned toward the warmth of the hearth. A hand rested loosely at their side, fingers relaxed, no longer shaped by work or effort. Sleep had softened everything. The fire released a soft sound as a piece of wood settled inward. It was barely noticeable, a small reminder that time was still passing. Then the quiet returned, thicker than before. Outside, the village paths lay empty beneath the moon. Pale light traced the edges of roofs and fences, turning familiar shapes into gentle outlines. Nothing moved, nothing needed to. The fields beyond the houses stretched wide and dark. The soil rested, holding the memory of footsteps and tools, waiting patiently for morning. A faint mist clung low to the ground, drifting slowly, changing shape without purpose. A bird stirred briefly in its place among the beams of a barn, then tucked itself deeper into stillness. The night welcomed the movement and then let it go. In another house, an older man lay awake, though not restless. His eyes were open, gazing into the dimness. He listened to the silence, not searching for anything within it. He had learned long ago that silence did not need to be filled. It was enough on its own. After a while, his breathing slowed, his thoughts loosened, and his eyes closed. Sleep took him without resistance, the way water takes a stone resting at its edge. The embers dimmed further, ash settled. The fire became only a faint suggestion of light, barely noticeable unless watched closely. The dog by the doorway lifted its head once more, ears turning slightly as if listening to something far away. There was nothing. Satisfied, it lowered its head again, body heavy with rest. The night held the village in careful balance, not too cold, not too dark, just enough of both to encourage stillness. No voices carried through the air, no tools struck wood or stone. Even the wind seemed to pause, moving only when it had to, brushing lightly against walls and branches. The hours passed unnoticed. Time here did not announce itself. It slipped by quietly, like a shadow crossing a floor. Somewhere deep in the village, a child shifted beneath a blanket, then sighed softly and slept on. Dreams moved gently through sleeping minds, simple and untroubled. The moon continued its slow journey across the sky, casting its light without expectation. It did not rush, it did not linger. It moved as it always had. Inside the houses, warmth remained just enough to keep sleep comfortable. Blankets rose and fell with steady breathing. The village existed in dozens of small moments of rest, all joined together by the same night. No voices carried through the air, no tools struck wood or stone. Even the wind seemed to pause, moving only when it had to, brushing lightly against walls and branches. The hours passed unnoticed. Time here did not announce itself. It slipped by quietly, like a shadow crossing a floor. Somewhere deep in the village, a child shifted beneath a blanket, then sighed softly and slept on. Dreams moved gently through sleeping minds, simple and untroubled. The moon continued its slow journey across the sky, casting its light without expectation. It did not rush, it did not linger, it moved as it always had. Inside the houses, warmth remained just enough to keep sleep comfortable. Blankets rose and fell with steady breathing. The village existed in dozens of small moments of rest, all joined together by the same night. Nothing marked the approach of morning yet. No birds called, no light touched the horizon. The world remained in its deepest quiet, suspended between what had been and what would come. The land, the houses, the people, all rested together. There was no separation between them now, only shared stillness. Even thoughts seemed to slow, stretching out, becoming fewer. The night asked for nothing more than presence, and the village gave it freely. Far beyond the fields, the world continued in ways unseen, but here, in this small place, everything was contained within darkness and breath. The fire gave one last faint glow, then settled fully into ash. The room grew darker, but not colder. The night adjusted, holding its shape. Soon light would return, work would begin again, paths would fill with footsteps, but that time had not arrived yet. For now, the village remained exactly as it was meant to be, quiet, resting, untouched by hurry.
The night continued, long and patient, carrying the sleeping village toward morning without sound.
The night had settled fully now, pressing gently against the wooden walls of every house. Inside, the world felt smaller, shaped by firelight, shadows, and breath. The outdoors no longer mattered. What remained was warmth, quiet, and the slow passing of hours. In one house, the fire had been carefully tended to last. The flames were low but steady, curling softly around the remaining wood. Each movement of the fire was unhurried, as if it understood the pace of the night. Light spread across the room in uneven patterns, resting briefly on faces, hands, and worn furniture before drifting away again. A woman sat close to the hearth, her back straight, her feet tucked beneath her. She held a small bundle of fabric in her lap, fingers moving slowly as she worked. The stitches were not perfect, but they were strong. That was enough. Her breathing matched the rhythm of her hands, steady and calm, without thought. Across the room, a man leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. He was not asleep yet, but close. The warmth reached him gradually, easing the stiffness from his shoulders and arms. Each breath felt deeper than the last, as though the day were leaving him bit by bit. The room smelled of wood smoke and wool. It was a familiar scent, one that belonged to every night like this one. It clung softly to everything, settling into clothes and hair, into the grain of the walls themselves. The child slept nearby, wrapped tightly in a blanket. Their face was relaxed, mouth slightly open, breath slow and even. From time to time they shifted, then settled again, drawn deeper into rest by the quiet around them. The candle on the small table burned low. Its flame leaned slightly, reacting to the subtle movement of air in the room. Wax had pooled and hardened at its base, building layer upon layer from evenings past. No one noticed. No one needed to. Outside the walls, the night continued in silence. Inside, the world felt protected, held together by warmth and habit. The hours did not press forward. They stretched gently, allowing space for rest. In another house nearby, an older woman sat alone, hands folded in her lap. She listened to the sound of the fire, to the faint settling of the building as it cooled. These sounds were not interruptions. They were part of the night's voice. Her eyes followed the slow movement of shadows along the wall. Each shadow shifted when a flame bent or straightened, creating shapes that lasted only a moment before dissolving. She watched without curiosity, without expectation. Watching was enough. The fire popped softly. A small piece of wood collapsed inward, sending a brief shower of sparks upward before they vanished. The room returned to its steady glow. Further down the lane, a man lay awake on his bed, staring at the dark ceiling above him. His thoughts wandered slowly, touching moments from the day without holding on to them. The work had been heavy but familiar. There was no regret in it, no urgency. Tomorrow would ask for the same, and he would answer in the same way. He turned slightly, adjusting the blanket around his shoulders. The fabric scratched faintly against his skin, a sensation so familiar it barely registered. Soon, even that faded as his body relaxed further. The fire in his home was almost out now, reduced to glowing embers beneath a layer of ash. The heat they gave off was gentle but steady, enough to keep the room comfortable through the long hours ahead. In one corner, a wooden chest stood closed, its surface worn smooth by years of use. Inside were simple things, owned not for display, but for need. They rested quietly, as everything did now. The village shared this stillness across its homes. Though walls separated them, the same night pressed against each roof, the same quiet filled every room. Breathing slowed everywhere at once, as though guided by an unseen rhythm. No one marked the passing of time. There were no clocks, no signals.
The body knew when to rest, when to drift, when to sleep. That knowledge was old, older than memory. A dog curled at the foot of a bed lifted its head briefly, then sighed and settled again. Its body was warm, solid, reassuring. Sleep claimed it easily. The candle finally burned down, its flame shrinking until it vanished. Darkness filled the space it left behind, but the fire still glowed faintly, offering enough light to soften the dark. Shadows blended together now, losing their edges. The room became a single quiet shape, defined more by warmth than by sight. The night stretched onward, unbroken. Inside the houses, nothing changed quickly. Everything moved at the pace of rest. This was the long night indoors, where time slowed and the world narrowed to breath, warmth, and silence. And within that silence, the village rested, held gently by the hours that asked nothing in return.
Part 2. The Long Night Indoors. The stillness did not deepen all at once. It gathered slowly, layer by layer, like ash settling after a fire has burned long and evenly. Inside the houses, nothing marked the change, yet everything felt heavier, quieter, more contained. The woman by the hearth continued her work for a while longer, though her hands had begun to slow. Each stitch took more time than the one before. Her fingers no longer followed the fabric with full attention, guided instead by habit and memory. The needle paused between movements, held loosely, as if waiting for permission to continue. The fire responded in its own way. It shifted gently, embers pressing inward, light dimming just enough to soften the room further. Warmth remained, spreading evenly through the small space, settling into walls, floors, and bodies alike. Across the room, the man's head leaned back against the wood. His eyes closed fully now, not with intention, but because there was no reason to keep them open. His breathing deepened, slow and steady, matching the quiet pulse of the night. The child stirred once beneath the blanket, a small movement that passed quickly. A hand curled, then relaxed again. Sleep held firm, untroubled and complete. The candle, nearly gone, cast a faint glow that barely reached the floor. Its flame wavered, thinned, then steadied again. Wax softened and slipped downward in silence. In the house where the older woman sat alone, she shifted her weight slightly, adjusting her posture without thought. The bench creaked softly beneath her, then settled. She rested her hands against the fabric of her skirt, feeling its familiar texture beneath her fingers. Her gaze moved from the wall to the hearth and back again. The fire's glow had faded to a dull red, its light no longer strong enough to shape shadows clearly. Instead, it suggested them, hinted at them, leaving the rest to the dark. She did not mind. Darkness was not an absence here. It was simply another part of the room. Farther along the lane, the man lying awake felt his thoughts begin to drift. They no longer followed clear paths. Images from the day rose briefly, then slipped away before taking shape. The sound of his own breathing filled the space where thoughts had been. The embers in his hearth shifted slightly, releasing a faint warmth that reached his face and hands. It was enough, more than enough. The dog at the foot of his bed twitched once, then grew still again, chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. Across the village, similar moments unfolded without awareness of one another. A hand loosened its grip on a blanket. A shoulder sank deeper into rest. A breath lengthened. The walls of the houses held the quiet inside them, keeping it from escaping into the night. Outside, the world remained dark and unmoving. Inside, the same stillness took root. The woman by the hearth finally set her work aside,
The fabric slipped gently from her lap as she placed it on the small table beside her. She did not examine her progress. There was no need. Tomorrow would see it again, or the next day, or another time entirely. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment, listening to the soft presence of the room, the fire, the breathing, the faint sounds of wood settling. All of it blended together into a single, continuous calm. The candle flame shrank, thinned, then disappeared. Darkness filled the space it left behind, complete but not sudden. The room adjusted, as though it had been waiting for this. The fire remained, glowing faintly, just enough to soften the edges of the dark. In the house of the older woman, she rose slowly from the bench, careful not to disturb the quiet she had been part of. Each movement was measured, deliberate. She crossed the room, her steps barely making a sound, and lay down on her bed. The blanket was heavy, warm from the fire's lingering heat. She pulled it close and rested her hands against her chest. Her breathing slowed almost immediately, drawn into the same rhythm as the night. Elsewhere, another fire collapsed inward, sending a soft whisper of sound through the room. It passed without notice. Time continued, though no one marked it. The night did not push forward. It held its shape, steady and wide. The rooms grew darker as embers dimmed. Shapes lost their edges, blending together into warmth and shadow. Sight mattered less now. Touch, breath, and stillness took its place. A faint draft moved through a crack in one wall, cool but gentle. It brushed against skin, then faded. The fire responded with a soft glow, balancing the change. The village rested fully indoors now, gathered into itself. No one stood, no one watched. The night was no longer something to observe. It was something to be within. Breathing slowed everywhere at once, not by design, but by nature. The long night continued, unbroken, unfolding at a pace too slow to measure. Nothing ended, nothing began. The hours simply remained, holding the village in quiet warmth, carrying it deeper into rest without sound.
The night held its position, neither advancing nor retreating. It remained steady, as though the world had paused within it. Inside the houses, warmth lingered softly, no longer spreading, no longer fading, simply existing in balance with the dark. The fire in the first home had settled into ash and embers. The glow was faint now, barely more than a suggestion of light. It revealed nothing clearly, yet it kept the cold from pressing too close. The room breathed slowly, shaped by quiet and rest. The woman lay on her side, her face turned toward the hearth. Her hands were still, resting where they had fallen. Sleep had taken her fully now, smoothing the lines of effort from her body. Each breath rose and fell without pause, without thought. Beside her, the man shifted once, a small movement, then grew still again. The blanket moved slightly with him, then settled. His body accepted the night completely, no longer holding the weight of the day. The child slept on, deep and undisturbed. Dreams passed gently, leaving no mark. The warmth of the room wrapped around them, steady and secure. In the house where the older woman had lain down, the fire was almost gone. Only a dull red glimmer remained beneath the ash. The room was darker than before, but the darkness felt full, not empty. It carried the quiet carefully, as though aware of its importance. Her breathing was slow and even. The rise and fall of her chest marked the only movement in the room. The night listened, patient and unchanging. Further along the lane, the man who had been awake earlier now slept. His thoughts had loosened completely, drifting away without resistance.
The ceiling above him no longer mattered. The room no longer existed as a shape. There was only rest. The dog at his feet lay heavy and warm, pressed against the bed. Its breathing matched his, slow and steady, the sound barely audible. Outside the houses, the village remained still. Moonlight rested lightly on roofs and fences, tracing familiar lines without altering them. The fields beyond lay dark and quiet, mist drifting low across the soil. No sound traveled far. Even the smallest movement seemed absorbed by the night before it could carry. Inside each home, the air cooled slightly as embers dimmed. The change was gentle, almost unnoticeable. Blankets and walls held the warmth, keeping sleep comfortable and deep. Time passed without direction. The night did not feel longer or shorter. It simply was. A beam in one house creaked softly as the wood adjusted to the cooling air. The sound was brief, then gone. Nothing followed it. In another room, a hand slipped from beneath a blanket and rested against the mattress. Fingers relaxed, uncurling fully. The body settled deeper into sleep. The night did not demand silence. It received it naturally, as a surface receives shadow. The fires no longer moved. Ash lay still. Light faded to memory. The houses, once separate, felt connected now by the same darkness and warmth. Each room held its own quiet, yet all were part of the same long night indoors. Breathing continued everywhere, slow and unbroken. It was the only rhythm left, the only sign that time still moved. No one dreamed loudly. No one stirred. The village rested at its deepest point, held between what had passed and what had not yet arrived. The moon climbed higher, then began its slow descent. Its light shifted almost imperceptibly across the land, touching different edges, leaving others behind. No one noticed. Inside, sleep remained steady. The night wrapped itself gently around every shape, every breath, every thought that had been let go. The long night indoors stretched onward, calm and complete, asking nothing, changing nothing, carrying the village quietly toward whatever would come next. The village lay completely still now, the long night stretching without change. Even the soft breathing of the sleepers seemed to carry the weight of time itself, slow and deliberate, as though the world outside had paused in respect for the quiet within. Inside the small homes, the last embers glowed dimly, casting faint, unsteady light across wooden walls. Every shadow seemed rooted, refusing to move, as though the darkness had learned to hold itself in place. There was no urgency, no shift in tone, only the soft, even rhythm of life wrapped in night. A man shifted slightly on his bed, turning onto his side with the blanket sliding loosely over his shoulders. His breathing deepened, stretching evenly with the rise and fall of his chest. His hands rested quietly near his face, fingers relaxed, untouched by the day's work. Sleep had taken him fully, a gentle surrender to the steady pulse of the long night. Nearby, a child stirred once, stretching faintly beneath a thick woolen blanket. The movement was slight, almost imperceptible, yet it carried the same weight of stillness as the rest of the room. One small sigh, and then the body sank deeper into rest again. Every muscle eased, every thought softened, leaving only the quiet that filled the space like water. In another house, an older woman lay on her bed, eyes closed, chest rising and falling with careful rhythm. Her hands were loosely clasped over the blanket, fingers soft against the wool. The fire had dwindled into a faint glow, yet warmth lingered, enough to wrap around her shoulders and settle along the curves of the floor. The shadows around her remained static, gentle and unbroken. The wind whispered lightly outside, brushing against the eaves and bare branches. It was cool, but not cold, a passing presence that did not disturb the night. The sound was soft, nearly swallowed by the stillness inside each home. Where it passed, a faint creak answered, a subtle reminder of wood bending gently in the dark. A dog shifted its weight near the foot of a bed, then settled once more, breathing slow, steady, as though counting the rhythm of the house itself. Somewhere farther away, another dog answered with a low sound, brief and unassuming. No one noticed, and no one needed to. It became part of the fabric of the night, absorbed into silence. In the smallest corner of one home, a kettle sat on a hook above faintly glowing embers, the water inside barely moving. It whispered a soft, muted sound, the faintest hint of warmth pressing upward, almost imperceptible. The household did not stir. They did not need to. The noise became part of the night, barely present, yet undeniably there. The rooms felt heavier now, not oppressive, but full of quiet, each one containing its own pulse of warmth and breath. The night carried the weight without complaint, extending itself evenly over walls, floors, and bodies. Nothing pressed for attention, nothing demanded recognition. It simply existed. The moon hung high, thin and pale, its light touching roof edges and narrow lanes. It traced faint lines over wooden fences, across dirt paths, and into windows that reflected only slivers of light. The glow entered some rooms for a moment, painting floors softly, then withdrew again, leaving warmth and shadow in its place. A man shifted lightly on a bench in one house, legs crossed beneath him, head leaning slightly forward. He did not open his eyes. He did not need to. His breathing matched the low pulse of the fire and the distant rhythm of the sleeping village. Each inhalation and exhalation was even, deliberate, and slow, anchoring him to the space without thought or effort. The embers of fires moved subtly, releasing the faintest glow in tiny pulses. Each pulse illuminated corners for a moment before fading again. Shadows bent, lengthened, softened, and merged seamlessly with the darkness beyond. Movement, if one could call it that, was almost invisible, almost irrelevant. The night tolerated only the smallest changes, careful and slow, measured and calm. In one room, a child's small hand emerged briefly from beneath a blanket, curling slightly before resting again. A soft murmur passed over lips, a breath half-formed, then vanished. Nothing disturbed the deep, steady rhythm of sleep that had taken hold. The room held its quiet, as though it were a separate world contained within walls of wood and warmth. The faint creak of wood expanded subtly in the still air. A floorboard shifted, a beam adjusted. The sound was absorbed immediately by the encompassing calm. It did not echo, it did not disturb. It belonged, like everything else, to the long night indoors. Outside, the village remained untouched. Paths lay empty, fences remained still, roofs pressed against the sky. The moonlight shifted slowly, moving across the fields beyond. Shadows lengthened and shrank, slowly and imperceptibly. Mist clung to the ground, thin, pale, drifting without urgency, almost invisible in the faint moonlight. Inside, every breath, every movement, every flicker of ember or candle became part of the same uninterrupted rhythm. Nothing interrupted it. Nothing intruded. The night was complete, patient, unbroken, as though time had chosen to rest with the village. The fire in one home finally dropped to faint glowing coals. The warmth remained, soft and steady. Shadows were static now, pressed into corners. No sound stirred the house but the steady rise and fall of sleeping chests, the subtle hum of life undisturbed. The night continued. It did not rush. It did not pause. It simply held, endlessly, seamlessly, carrying the village onward through the hours that no one counted, marking nothing, demanding nothing. Every body, every room, every hearth and floor breathed the same calm rhythm together. A faint breeze pressed lightly against window frames. A branch tapped softly against a roof. The sound passed without notice, absorbed immediately into the patient night. The moon moved slowly across the sky, tracing pale lines on the rooftops before shifting elsewhere. Its light remained quiet, never harsh, never urgent. Every corner of the village, every shadow, every ember, every sleeping body was part of the same long, unbroken silence. The night wrapped around the village as completely as a blanket around a child. It carried everything evenly, holding the world within itself, steady, calm, and infinite.
The night grew heavier, not in pressure but in presence. It filled every room completely, leaving nothing untouched, yet disturbing nothing. Every hearth glowed faintly, every ember a gentle reminder that warmth still existed, even in the deepest hours. Shadows settled into corners as if they had always belonged there, and the small movements of the world felt inconsequential, swallowed entirely by quiet. Inside the first home, the man on the bed shifted slightly. His blanket rustled soft and brief before settling again. His breathing remained slow, even, and almost musical in its regularity. Each rise and fall of his chest measured the passage of the night, unhurried and deliberate. Sleep carried him fully now, drawing away the fatigue of the day with gentle insistence. The woman on the hearthside couch shifted, lifting one arm lazily before resting it back on the blanket. Her fingers flexed once, then relaxed. The fabric beside her lay undisturbed, still warm from earlier work. The firelight shimmered faintly on her skin, a slow, golden pulse that deepened the shadows and softened the edges of the room. She did not wake, she did not stir. Only breath, slow and even, marked her presence. A child nestled beneath a thick blanket shifted again. Their hand brushed the edge of the cover, then sank under it. Small movements like this went unnoticed in the broader calm, yet they were part of the living rhythm of the house. Sleep pressed gently over the body, coiling tightly around limbs, torso, and face. Even dreams seemed to move slowly, measured in the same deliberate pace as the night itself. In the older woman's home, the embers dimmed to a faint glow, red and persistent. She lay flat, her blanket drawn tight over her shoulders. Her hands rested lightly on the wool, fingers uncurling slightly, pressing gently against the fabric. Every exhale came with softness, every inhalation deep and even. The ruined shadows merged with the darkness beyond the walls, creating a single, infinite space filled only with rest. The floorboards creaked quietly in one corner of the room, a small settling sound, nothing more. Even this slight movement seemed absorbed immediately into the patient stillness, leaving no trace of disturbance. The night allowed everything its place, no louder, no faster, no brighter than necessary. The dog at the foot of the bed lifted its head once, then dropped it. Its breath was low, steady, almost in tune with the heartbeat of the sleeping room. Another shifted slightly in a distant house, tail curling over paws before it too became still. Life continued, but muted and subdued, a soft, continuous rhythm that required nothing beyond quiet observation. Outside, the moon moved slowly across the sky, pale light brushing against rooftops and fences. Paths and fields lay untouched, empty of human motion. Mist drifted low over the soil, thin and unhurried. The night swallowed every sound, folding them into its immense calm. There were no voices, no animals stirring beyond the occasional faint sound of breath or shifting fur. Even the breeze seemed measured, a gentle push against walls and roof, then gone. Inside the first house, a kettle hung above faint coals. Water inside whispered softly, rising and falling with tiny shifts in temperature.
The sound was so slight it was almost imagined, yet it became part of the rhythm of the night, pressing gently against ears, absorbed into the deep stillness. No one moved to tend it. The house had reached its perfect quiet. The woman's hand, still folded atop her blanket, twitched once, fingers curling slightly before relaxing. Her face tilted lightly toward the hearth's faint warmth, shadows moving slowly across her features, revealing nothing, concealing nothing. The rhythm of her breathing seemed to blend with that of the fire and the fading coals, a seamless pulse of quiet life. In another room, the older man stirred minimally. A shoulder shifted, a hand brushed against the mattress, then still. Sleep had claimed him entirely, yet he remained alive in small, invisible movements, proof of life carried lightly through the night. His chest rose and fell in even increments, slow and deliberate, echoing across the room like a soft, steady drumbeat in the hush. The night pressed gently against the walls, embracing everything within, drawing a delicate line between the warmth inside and the cool air outside. Wood sighed occasionally, a soft settling that sounded like a gentle exhale. The rhythm was invisible, yet undeniable, the night's presence tangible without being intrusive. Every candle had long since extinguished, only the faint glow of embers remained, red and steady, holding the warmth without imposing it. Shadows deepened, shapes became contours, the room lost its edges, darkness became complete, but soft, safe, infinite. The village, in all its small houses, rested in unison. No one stirred beyond the occasional twitch of limb or shift of blanket. Each room's quiet echoed into the next, though walls separated them. The night acted as a single container, holding warmth, breath, shadow, and rest together as one living space. A dog's breath in one home rose slowly, another's tail twitched faintly. The finest of sounds became part of the seamless calm, unnoticed yet present. Even the faint stir of air through cracks in walls merged into the pulse of the long night. The moonlight shifted slowly, touching different edges of roofs, fences, and fields. The soft lines it drew were never static, yet the night did not seem to care. Nothing needed to be sharp, nothing needed to move quickly. The passage of time was a gentle suggestion, easily ignored by those sleeping within. Inside, every ember and shadow, every chest rising and falling, every quiet murmur of breath became part of a single living rhythm. Nothing interrupted it, nothing intruded. The night remained unbroken, holding the village gently in its slow, deliberate pace. Every house, every hearth, every sleeper was bound to the same calm. The night neither demanded attention nor offered it. It existed as a vast, patient presence, carrying the long hours without end or interruption. And in the stillness, there was nothing missing. Nothing outside was necessary. Every sound, every movement, every trace of warmth or shadow belonged wholly to the night, contained within the village as though it had always been there and would always remain.
Part 4. Before the First Light. The night held the village in a gentle, unbroken embrace, but hints of change began to stir. The darkness remained complete, deep and soft, yet it carried a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, a quiet tension at the edges of the world, a suggestion that something would soon move. Even within the warm houses, the air seemed slightly different, heavier in some places, cooler in others, as if the night itself were stretching before giving way. Inside the first home, the man on the bed stirred minutely, his hand twitching over the blanket, fingers flexing as the night's weight pressed evenly across his body. He did not wake, nor did he open his eyes. His breath deepened subtly, stretching, filling the room with the same slow rhythm it had held all night. Sleep remained steady, yet the body moved just enough to remind itself of its own presence. The child beside him shifted once, curling tighter beneath the woolen cover. A soft sigh passed over lips, almost inaudible, almost imagined. The blanket pressed warmly against shoulders, chest, and limbs. Even the small stretch of hands and feet seemed purposeful, yet subdued, part of the slow unfolding rhythm of the early hours. The unwoman by the hearth shifted as well, lifting one arm slightly before allowing it to fall back. Fingers pressed briefly against the wool in her lap, then relaxed. The fire, reduced now to faint embers, pulsed softly, releasing a subtle warmth that touched the shadows. Light was thinner now, fading and stretching across walls, forming gentle, elongated shapes that shifted only when the ember flickered. In another house, the older woman's breath shifted, slow but slightly deeper than it had been. Her chest rose, paused, and fell again, marking a rhythm almost imperceptibly longer than before. The faint red glow of the hearth painted her blanket in soft, warm tones, yet shadows merged seamlessly into corners. The room felt suspended in a quiet stillness, as though the night had slowed its own pace, holding time gently before the approaching hours. Outside, the wind moved lightly, brushing against the eaves, shaking loose a single leaf that fell quietly to the ground. Moonlight stretched thin over rooftops and fences, tracing soft lines across the dark soil beyond the village. Mist clung low to the fields, shifting slowly, gathering and releasing in equal measure. Every element, every movement seemed to recognize the stillness of the moment, passing quietly, absorbed immediately into the deep night. A dog at the foot of one bed shifted, curling its body tighter. Tail brushed gently against its paws, then settled. Its breathing remained steady, synchronized with the pulse of the room. Across the village, similar small movements occurred. An ear twitched, a paw flexed, a tail shifted, but nothing broke the overarching calm. Even the smallest movement seemed contained by the patient stillness surrounding it. The kettle that hung above faint coals murmured softly as the water inside moved just enough to release a faint heat into the room. No one stirred to attend it. The noise blended completely into the rhythm of the house, becoming part of the deep, patient pulse of the long night. Light, warmth, sound, and shadow continued to flow together seamlessly. In the first house, the man on the bed lifted his head slightly, without opening his eyes. The blanket slipped marginally from his shoulder, then he returned to full stillness. His breathing lengthened subtly, drawing in the cool early air that had found its way through small cracks in the walls. Each exhale, long and calm, passed into the room, merging with the quiet, the warmth, and the fading shadows. The woman on the couch shifted as well, adjusting slightly, her arm brushing against the fabric of her blanket. The ember glow highlighted the curves of her fingers, stretched them faintly, then returned them to shadow. Every movement was slow, deliberate, unhurried, almost ceremonial in its own right, yet entirely natural, part of the rhythm that the night had nurtured for hours. The older man on the bench shifted, rolling his shoulder minimally, adjusting his posture without opening his eyes. Each small motion was absorbed by the stillness of the room. Even the faint creak of floorboards was taken in without notice, woven immediately into the slow, steady pulse of rest that filled the village. The moon climbed slightly higher, casting softer lines over rooftops, fences, and winding lanes. Shadows stretched longer, thinned, then folded into the mist. The night remained patient, holding time and space as if to prolong the depth of sleep, as if unwilling to let go of the quiet it had maintained. The air itself seemed fuller, denser, richer with warmth and breath. Every house breathed in unison, every ember pulsed faintly, every sleeper's chest rose and fell in near-perfect synchronization. The long night indoors stretched on, seamless and uninterrupted. Nothing demanded notice, nothing broke the calm. The village existed entirely within the slow cadence of night, a world held gently,
intimately in the arms of darkness. And beneath it all, the faintest suggestion of change lingered, so delicate that it could only be felt, not seen. The night had not ended. It had merely paused, suspended at the edge of the first light, holding its breath, preparing to allow the world beyond the village to move once again.
The night remained patient, a slow and constant presence pressing gently against the village. Within the walls of each home, the warmth of hearths lingered, faint and steady, a quiet companion to the steady rhythm of sleep. Shadows stretched across wooden floors and walls, soft and uninterrupted, deepening the sense that nothing moved too quickly here, nothing intruded upon the calm. The man on the bed shifted slightly, lifting an arm just enough to adjust the blanket. His fingers flexed and then relaxed again, unconscious movements absorbed seamlessly into the stillness. Each breath drew in warmth and faint traces of cool air, exhaling slowly into the room. The rhythm of his body matched that of the night, deliberate, measured, and unhurried. The child slept, wrapped tightly in a woolen blanket. A small sigh passed over lips, barely audible, barely existing outside the slow cadence of the house. Tiny fingers twitched once beneath the fabric, curling, then relaxing again. The faint warmth from the hearth pressed gently against the blanket, carrying into every limb, softening even the smallest movements. Sleep pressed fully, firmly, yet gently, like a tide that never rushed. The woman by the hearth shifted slightly, rolling her shoulders and adjusting her posture without opening her eyes. Fingers moved slightly over the blanket in her lap, brushing the fabric, then remaining still. The ember glow from the fire reflected faintly on her face, emphasizing the slow curvature of her cheekbones and the relaxed line of her mouth. Light and shadow moved together softly, merging and dissolving without urgency. In another house, the older woman shifted slightly beneath her blanket, hands flexing briefly before settling again. Her breathing remained synchronized with the household around it, slow, even, rhythmic. Another dog in a distant house made a small adjustment, curling tighter, breathing soft and steady. Movement existed, but only as part of the night, only as part of the deep, encompassing calm. The kettle over faint embers whispered softly as water inside shifted, releasing traces of heat into the surrounding room. No one stirred to tend it. The faint noise became one with the rhythm of the house, unnoticeable but present, absorbed into the seamless calm of pre-dawn hours. Shadows flickered slightly, responding to the faint glow, then resumed their stillness. The man on the bed lifted his head just enough to turn slightly, blanket slipping from his shoulder, then settled again into stillness. Breath lengthened, drawing cool air from small cracks in the wall. Exhalation spread softly, filling the room with the faintest hint of movement. Every sound, every pulse of warmth or shadow was measured, part of the rhythm of the night. The woman adjusted herself lightly, stretching an arm over the blanket, then relaxing again. Her fingers pressed faintly against the wool, the texture familiar, comforting. Embers reflected softly on her skin, highlighting the gentle curvature of her face and hands. Shadows played subtly across her features, elongated and then softened, merging again with the darkness beyond. Every small movement became part of the slow cadence of pre-dawn stillness. In the older man's house, he shifted minimally on the bench, rolling a shoulder and adjusting a hand. Sleep held him fully, yet the faintest motions existed, unnoticed but real, part of the quiet network of movement within the village. Breathing remained deep and even, echoing subtly against the walls of the room. Wood settled quietly in the houses. Floorboards shifted, beams flexed softly. Each faint noise was absorbed immediately, merging seamlessly into the steady, unbroken rhythm of the night. Embers glowed faintly, warmth spreading silently, light fading and stretching over walls and floors in equal measure. Moonlight continued its slow journey across the rooftops and lanes. Mist clung low, drifting across fields and pathways, bending and curling softly. The village existed entirely in this quiet suspension, each household breathing, each hearth glowing faintly, each shadow resting in its place. The rhythm was nearly imperceptible, yet everywhere, complete and unbroken. Inside the houses, the night held the warmth of embers, the faint sound of breathing, and the slow twitch of sleeping limbs. Each movement, each sound was absorbed, measured, and folded into the gentle, patient rhythm of the long night. Nothing demanded attention, nothing intruded. The village itself seemed suspended, held in balance, as though the hours would stretch this way indefinitely. And yet, under the careful, deliberate calm, the faintest sign of change lingered. A single breath stretched slightly longer. A shadow shifted in subtle, deliberate arcs. The air grew faintly cooler in some corners, and warmth pressed slightly harder in others. These were the first hints of pre-dawn, delicate enough to remain unnoticed, yet present, quietly preparing the village for the slow arrival of the day. The night's hold softened imperceptibly, a subtle shift that did not demand notice, yet could be felt by the smallest stirrings of life within the village. Darkness remained complete, but it was no longer absolute. Shadows began to thin at the edges, their corners blurring with the faintest suggestion of light. Every surface, every wall, every floor felt the gentle weight of anticipation, the quiet prelude to the first day. In the first home, the man on the bed shifted slightly, rolling onto his side. His blanket fell loosely from one shoulder, revealing the curve of his chest rising slowly with each breath. Sleep still held him, steady and complete, yet each inhalation and exhalation stretched just a fraction longer, deeper, carrying with it the subtle coolness creeping through the cracks of the walls. The room seemed to breathe along with him, every movement in perfect synchrony with the patient night. The child beside him stirred softly, stretching a hand from beneath the blanket. Fingers pressed gently against the wool, then relaxed again. A faint exhale passed over the lips, small, almost inaudible, yet marking the first trace of the body's recognition of the night's change. A tiny curl of the toes beneath the cover shifted, and then the body settled again, absorbed into the stillness that had carried the household for hours. The woman by the hearth moved slightly, adjusting her posture on the couch. Her arm extended over the blanket, brushing softly against the fabric before settling. Embers, faint and steady, flickered for a moment, sending a brief pulse of warmth across her hand. Shadows stretched thin and soft across the walls, elongating as the first hints of pre-dawn light began to edge in through narrow cracks in the shutters. Her breathing deepened imperceptibly, merging with the rhythm of the house. In the older woman's home, embers glowed faintly, red, orange, soft against the darkness. She lay still beneath the blanket, hands resting lightly on her chest. Her breath grew longer, deeper, carrying faint warmth from the fire outward into the room. Shadows moved subtly, drawn toward the corners as if sensing the earliest light yet to arrive. The room remained complete, still, yet poised delicately at the edge of transition. Outside, the wind stirred lightly against the eaves, shifting the few remaining leaves on the trees. Mist hovered low over the fields, curling and drifting, carrying the faint chill of the night with it. Moonlight still lingered, pale and thin, tracing edges of rooftops, fences, and the winding paths that led between homes. Shadows bent and elongated, softening as they merged with the advancing suggestion of light. The village held its breath, every element suspended in patient stillness. A dog at the foot of one bed shifted slightly, tail curling over its paws, chest rising slowly, its breathing synchronized with the rhythm of the room. Across the village, another dog murmured softly, a paw flexed, then relaxed. Movement remained minimal, absorbed completely by the deep, steady calm that filled each house. Nothing intruded, nothing broke the rhythm. The kettle that hung above faint coals murmured gently, the water inside shifting with the warmth. The sound was barely perceptible, yet it added to the layer of quiet rhythm that existed across the houses. Every soft noise, every flicker of light, every breath was absorbed seamlessly into the long, slow cadence of the night approaching dawn. The man on the bed adjusted slightly again, lifting a shoulder, then settling. His breath deepened, drawing cool air from the cracks along the walls. Exhalation carried warmth into the room, mixing imperceptibly with the faint glow of embers. Every movement, however small, was absorbed into the larger rhythm of the house, part of the seamless, gentle flow of the village's pre-dawn hours. The woman by the hearth moved slightly, adjusting her fingers across the blanket. Embers glowed briefly, painting soft light over the faint curves of her face and hands. Shadows moved subtly across walls, softening, elongating, dissolving. Every small motion, every breath, every sound blended into the patient cadence of the night. The older man in another house shifted slightly on his bench, rolling a shoulder, flexing a hand, then settling once more. Sleep still held him fully, yet these minimal motions were absorbed entirely by the room, by the warmth of the embers, by the darkness thinning at the edges. Breathing remained slow and steady, echoing faintly against walls and ceilings, part of the seamless rhythm that united all the village homes in quiet anticipation. The first hints of light reached across rooftops and narrow lanes, brushing softly against fences and the low mist of the fields. Shadows grew longer and thinner, edges blurring further as darkness loosened its hold. Every surface, every object, every corner seemed to pause in awareness, poised delicately between night and day. The village remained contained, held in quiet balance, each house breathing, each hearth glowing faintly, every sleeper still in gentle, measured rhythm. Even the smallest movements, fingers twitching beneath blankets, a shoulder rolling, a tail shifting, were absorbed into this seamless calm. The rhythm of the night did not break, it stretched with the faint light, carrying each household gently toward the first awareness of morning. The patient darkness, soft and infinite, allowed this slow change without disruption, holding everything together as one living pulse of warmth, shadow, and breath. And in this suspended, delicate moment, the village waited. Each ember, each shadow, each breath became part of the subtle anticipation of dawn. Nothing rushed, nothing intruded. The night remained complete, yet softened, preparing the world slowly, carefully, for the first day. The first light did not arrive all at once. It came as a thinning, a gentle easing of darkness rather than its removal. Pale gray crept into the sky beyond the village, pressing softly against the remaining stars until they faded without ceremony. The moon lost its clarity, its edges dissolving into the lightening air. Nothing announced the change. It simply happened, quietly, as if the night had decided to loosen its grip rather than release it. Inside the houses, the air shifted almost imperceptibly. Coolness lingered near the floors, while warmth from the embers held steady closer to the walls and beds. Shadows withdrew slightly, retreating into corners, no longer as deep or complete as before. Shapes became clearer, though still softened, as though the world were being gently redrawn. In the first home, the man on the bed inhaled deeply, then exhaled with a longer breath than any before. His chest rose and fell in a new rhythm, still slow, still calm, but subtly changed. One eye fluttered briefly beneath its lid, then stilled again. The blanket rose with his breathing, settling softly against his side. Morning had not arrived, but the body had begun to sense its approach. The child stirred, stretching one leg beneath the blanket until the fabric pulled taut, then relaxing again. Fingers slipped free for a moment, brushing the cool air before retreating back into warmth. A soft sound escaped the throat, not a word, not a wakeful noise, but a quiet acknowledgement of shifting time. Sleep remained, but it was lighter now, resting closer to the surface. By the hearth, the woman shifted slowly, lifting her head just enough to adjust the blanket beneath her shoulder. Embers glowed faintly, responding to a small draft as the air outside cooled and changed. The light touched her face differently now, revealing softer lines, clearer edges. Her breathing deepened, steady and unhurried, as though she were floating between rest and awareness. In the older woman's house, light filtered faintly through the shutters, tracing thin, pale lines across the floor. Her eyes remained closed, yet her hands moved slightly, fingers pressing together and then easing apart. Breath flowed evenly, but with a new depth, carrying both warmth and coolness together. The room felt fuller somehow, less contained by darkness alone. Outside, mist began to lift, not rising all at once, but thinning, drifting apart in gentle layers. The fields revealed themselves slowly, furrows appearing one by one. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and cold grass. A bird hopped once along a fence rail, claws clicking softly against the wood, then stilled again. The sound was small, contained, absorbed by the quiet. A dog lifted its head briefly, ears twitching, sensing the change. It did not rise. It simply lowered its head again, resting its chin against its paws, breathing steady. Somewhere else, another animal adjusted its position, responding not to sound, but to light. The kettle above the embers released a final quiet murmur as the water inside settled. The embers no longer pulsed as strongly, its glow now dimmer against the growing light. Shadows shortened slightly, folding inward, their movement slow and deliberate. Nothing hurried them away. The man on the bed shifted onto his back, one arm falling open beside him. His face relaxed further, jaw loosening, breath smoothing. His eyes remained closed, but awareness hovered nearby, waiting. The room around him felt different now, larger somehow, less held by the night. The woman by the hearth opened her eyes briefly, just enough to register the dim light on the wall opposite her. She did not move beyond that. Lids lowered again, and she settled back into stillness, content to remain in the quiet moment between sleeping and waking. Across the village, similar moments unfolded. A hand moved, a breath deepened, a body shifted just enough to recognize the morning without greeting it. The houses remained closed, the shutters firm, the hearths warm, lives contained within walls that had held them safely through the night. The sky brightened another degree, gray easing toward pale silver. The stars were gone now, erased without sound. The village did not respond. It remained calm, patient, unbroken. Morning was coming, but it had not yet arrived. And in that narrow space between night and day, the village rested, awake enough to feel the light, still enough to remain held by the quiet.
The light continued its slow advance, not brightening so much as spreading, filling spaces that had belonged entirely to shadow. It slipped through narrow gaps in shutters and between uneven boards, settling gently on floors and walls. The air carried a faint coolness now, balanced carefully against the warmth that still lingered from the embers. Nothing clashed, everything adjusted. In the first home, the man's breathing shifted again, not faster, only fuller. His chest expanded slightly more with each inhale, as though drawing in the changed air with quiet curiosity. One hand curled loosely at his side, fingers resting against the rough weave of the blanket. The fabric felt different now, cooler where it touched the air, warmer where it pressed against skin. He remained asleep, but sleep had loosened its hold. The child rolled gently onto one side, cheek pressing into the pillow. Eyes stayed closed, lashes unmoving, yet the body settled in a new position, more open, less tucked away. A faint line of light brushed the edge of the blanket, stopping just short of the child's hand. The moment held, unbroken, as if light itself were careful not to intrude too far. By the hearth, the woman shifted again, slower this time. She drew the blanket closer around her shoulders, the motion deliberate but unhurried. Her face turned slightly toward the wall where the light was growing clearer. It revealed the texture of the plaster, the grain of the wood, details that had been hidden all night. She did not open her eyes, she only breathed, steady and calm, as if acknowledging the change without responding to it. In the older woman's house, the room felt subtly larger. The darkness that had pressed inward through the night now retreated, leaving more space between objects. A stool emerged from shadow, its legs clearly defined. The table's edge caught the light, soft but visible. The woman's hands moved again, fingers curling lightly into the blanket, then relaxing. Her breathing remained even, but the pauses between breaths shortened just slightly. Outside, the mist thinned further, breaking apart into drifting strands. The fields revealed themselves slowly, furrows appearing one by one. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and cold grass. A bird hopped once along a fence rail, claws clicking softly against the wood, then stilled. The sound carried briefly, then faded, leaving the quiet intact. A dog rose part way, shifting its weight, then lay down again in a new position. Its ears twitched toward the open air, then relaxed. Breathing resumed its steady rhythm, chest rising and falling against the ground. The animal did not watch the light, it simply existed within it. The kettle above the hearth no longer murmured. The water inside rested, heat dissipating slowly. The embers dimmed further, their glow no longer strong enough to shape the room on their own. Light now shared that task, soft and pale, spreading without effort. Shadows shortened again, pulling closer to the objects that cast them. The man on the bed stirred, turning his head slightly toward the light, his brow smoothed, jaw loosening further. For a brief moment, his breathing paused at the top of an inhale, then continued. He did not wake. He hovered just beneath it, held by the quiet. The woman by the hearth opened her eyes again, this time for a fraction longer. She saw the wall, the pale light, the stillness of the room. Nothing demanded movement.
Her eyes closed once more, and she remained where she was, suspended between rest and readiness. Across the village, similar shifts unfolded. A shoulder rolled, a blanket was drawn closer, a foot stretched then relaxed. None of it hurried, none of it broke the calm. The houses remained closed, the village still turned inward, allowing the morning to arrive gently, without announcement. The sky brightened another shade, gray easing toward pale silver. The sun itself was still hidden, but its presence could be felt, not as warmth yet, but as direction. Light now had a source, even if unseen. The village accepted it quietly, without response. And so the moment held, night fully gone, day not yet begun. Breath followed breath, light followed light. The village remained still, balanced carefully in the early hours, waiting without effort for whatever would come next.
The light strengthened only slightly, enough to soften the last remnants of night without disturbing the calm. It pressed more evenly now, no longer creeping but resting gently across rooftops, fields, and walls. The sky remained pale and quiet, holding its color without brightness, as if the sun itself were still pausing beyond the horizon. Inside the first home, the man's breathing settled into a steady, wakeful rhythm, though his eyes remained closed. His hand shifted, fingers flexing once against the blanket before relaxing again. The room around him felt clearer, more open, yet unchanged in its purpose. Nothing urged him to rise. The moment asked only for awareness, not action. The child stirred again, this time lifting a knee slightly beneath the blanket before letting it fall back into place. A faint crease formed between the brows, then smoothed away. Sleep loosened further, becoming lighter, thinner, but still present. The pale light traced the edge of the bed, stopping just short of the child's face, as if respecting the final layers of rest. By the hearth, the woman adjusted her position slowly, sitting a little more upright without fully rising. The blanket slid down her arm, and she caught it gently, drawing it back around her shoulders. Her eyes opened, steady and calm, taking in the room as it was now, quiet, pale, familiar. She did not move beyond that. She simply sat, breathing, allowing the morning to settle around her. In the older woman's house, the light reached further across the floor, revealing the grain of the wood and the worn places shaped by years of footsteps. She exhaled slowly, then inhaled again, deeper than before. Her eyes remained closed, but her face relaxed into a different expression, one no longer shaped by sleep alone, but by the quiet knowledge that the night had passed. Outside, the mist continued to thin, lifting gently from the fields and gathering briefly along hedges before dissolving. The shapes of distant trees became clearer, their branches etched softly against the pale sky. A bird called once, a single low sound, then fell silent again. The call did not echo, it settled into the morning and stayed there. A dog stood now, stretching slowly, front legs extending, back arching, then relaxing. It shook itself once, softly, fur settling back into place, then stepped a short distance before stopping. It did not leave the yard. It only stood, breathing, watching the light. The kettle hung still above the hearth, its surface dull now, no longer reflecting firelight, but catching the pale glow of morning. The embers beneath it faded further, warmth lingering without flame. Shadows retreated again, thinning until they became soft outlines rather than deep shapes. The man on the bed opened his eyes at last, slowly, without urgency. He did not move immediately.
He looked toward the ceiling, toward the pale light filling the room. His breath remained even. Awareness arrived fully now, calm and untroubled. He stayed where he was, letting the moment exist without response. The child's eyes fluttered once, then again before opening part way. The gaze remained unfocused, drifting across the light without settling. A hand emerged from the blanket, resting against the mattress. The child did not speak. The morning did not require it. By the hearth, the woman shifted her feet onto the floor, toes touching the cool wood. She paused there, neither standing nor retreating, simply acknowledging the temperature, the texture, the presence of the day. Her hands rested loosely in her lap. Her breathing remained slow. Across the village, doors stayed closed. Fires were not yet stirred. Tools remained where they had been left the night before. The village did not wake all at once. It unfolded slowly, one breath, one movement at a time. The sky brightened another fraction, pale silver leaning toward soft gold at the horizon. The sun itself remained unseen, but its nearness could be felt now, pressing gently against the edges of the world. And in that quiet, the first light fully arrived, not as a beginning, but as a continuation. The village accepted it without ceremony, holding still just a moment longer before the day would finally ask to be lived.